Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Patti Brennan Show. Whether you have $20 or $20 million, this show is for all of you. Whether you have $100 million, whatever. It's for anybody who wants to protect and grow and use their assets to live your very best lives. We don't measure people by how much money they have. Some people are just starting out, and some people have amassed a fortune. There's something here for all of you, right?
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't have said it better. And I think what's interesting is that, ultimately, what is money? It is a means to an end, but more importantly, it buys options.
Yes,
right?
It does.
It allows you to take back your time and allocate it the way you see fit.
Exactly.
And that's ultimately the most important thing of what it provides, regardless of whatever the amount is.
You know, Eric, I didn't even introduce you. I just turned to you because I feel like everybody already knows you, but let me introduce our Chief Planning Officer. This is a, Dear Patti segment. It really should be Dear Patti and Eric, because Eric has been with me for over 20 years, and it's been a wonderful relationship, a cross-mentoring relationship. It started out me mentoring him. Now it's reverse mentoring. He's mentoring me. And it's a wonderful relationship where we go back and forth. So we thought this would be a kind of a neat way to present the questions that listeners have been writing to us for the past few years since we started this podcast.
Yeah, Patti, I think it's interesting how you define it as a mentorship. I would actually categorize it as maybe a shared curiosity about a particular set of subjects that ultimately we're both very passionate about and bring us enjoyment to continue asking the questions. And I just feel like, 2 decades is a long time. I don't know about you, but I just feel like the older I get, I don't necessarily feel I know more. I just have more questions.
Me too,
and more
Eric.
curiosity, if anything, to learn.
That's what's so much fun about this. Yeah. And folks, just so you know, Eric and I tend to be the last people that leave the office, and invariably you'll come into my office and we'll start to talk, and we both get really excited about something, a question that's coming up or something that one of us have discovered. We share it with the other person, and we just love it. We go deep, and it's fun. It's really, and a lot of the questions that we are asked gives us the opportunity to dig deeper to answer those questions.
But, at the same time, and not to go off track here with our topics for today, which are important too, but what a blessing it is, how fortunate to live in a world where there is such an abundance of information at our fingertips to be able to ask these questions and then essentially kind of weave a mosaic that helps us kind of understand the world in a way that ultimately is beneficial for others that are trying to plan out their lives and find financial security, meaning, and purpose, and so forth.
And that was the whole purpose of starting this podcast, right? Because we take care of our clients so holistically, and there are so many people that don't have somebody that they can call to ask anything, somebody they can count on, that they know has their back. They don't have to retell their story over and over again. So these questions that we've received are questions from listeners, right? Yeah. So why don't we start with the first one?
So Patti, you teed that up beautifully. So today we're going to continue with our popular Dear Patti series. And again, as you said, these are questions that are coming from listeners. And it's just amazing how they really mirror the conversations that you and I have each and every day with our clients. So we're going to start with our first question here. And it says, Dear Patti, and by the way, also the topic for today's conversation is going to be around retirement planning. So first listener says, Dear Patti, I'm 62 and planning to retire in the next year or two. I have a mix of Social Security and a small pension and about $2.5 million in investment accounts. I'm worried how to actually start pulling money from all of these resources. How do I know which faucets, if you will, to turn on first and when, right? So this is a question we get all the time.
Right. Excellent question. We talked before about the 4 phases of retirement. This is the phase of ambiguity. How is this going to work? How am I going to recreate my cash flow? It's an important question. And first of all, whoever you are out there that sent this question into us, thank you. And congratulations for amassing a really nice portfolio. You've done a great job and you're asking the right question. You know, when you retire, you pretty much have whatever you're going to have. And then it's just a matter of how that spends out for the rest of your life. And what you've articulated so well is you've got some income that you can count on coming in, but there's a gap. How do I fill that gap?
Isn't that what you call mailbox money? Or
Mailbox.
Is that the term you use all the time?
Exactly.
Mailbox money, right? So how do we kind of supplant, replace the paycheck, if you will?
Exactly.
How do we make up for the difference?
Especially given the curveballs that most retirees are going to face. It could be a financial crisis of some sort. Markets go down. It could be a personal crisis. It could be, hey, mom and dad, can you send money type of crisis. Things are going to pop up. We never know what they're going to be or when they're going to happen.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so to the listener's point of view, what they've highlighted here is kind of this three-legged stool approach to retirement, right? There's the guaranteed income, then there's things like pensions, which some people have, some people don't. But then that investment portfolio has to kind of be the third leg of the stool.
Yeah.
But that's a very complicated question, right? Because it depends on where the money's located,
You bet.
what tax bracket might prevail, what does are they pre-Medicare, post-Medicare, right? So there's a lot of things to unpack there. And then how do you invest the money to then create that?
Exactly.
So it's a complicated question.
And by the way, when should they start taking Social Security? Things of that nature. So that's why I got to tell you, you got to run the numbers. You got to figure it out, right? But to answer this listener's question, assuming they don't have an advisor, basically it comes down to understanding that you don't need access to all $2.5 million right away. So what we would suggest is setting your portfolio up into 3 pools of money. Pool number 1 is basically the 0 to 3 year money. And what I mean by that is figure out what that gap is from the other sources of reliable income that you can expect. It is what it is. Let's say it's $5,000 a month you have to make up. Okay, fine. That's $60,000 a year. Over 3 years, I would probably earmark about $200,000 in safe and secure investments, over and above what you keep in your emergency fund, in the bank, etc. So that's pool number 1. Pool number 2 is the next 3 years, right? Put another $200,000 there. And by the way, this is just a withdrawal strategy. And then pool number 3 is your long-term money. That could be investments in stocks and, international securities and things of that nature. So pool number 1 is safe and secure. Pool number 2, it's not as guaranteed. It kind of goes up and down, but it more like jiggles. It doesn't do this kind of stuff, which is real volatility. That stuff belongs in pool number 3. And my point to that is, this is an art, not a science. We never know what's going to happen or how long it's going to last. But when you go back, 7 years is a long period of time.
Yeah.
In most of the crises we've had, in modern America since, the 50s, markets had more than recovered by year 7. So you don't have to panic about what's happening in those pool 3 assets. Yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable. You're not going to like it. You're going to see losses. If it's so uncomfortable that you want to do something about it, don't look at it. Just know you're 7 years ahead of needing to worry about it. That's what I would suggest.
Well, I think it's so powerful by that concept that we use for our clients, this pools of money concept, is I think for most people, it's just the fear of not having a structure.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's what the pools of money do, is that they really provide a framework, but a process that's repeatable that helps give them the confidence to understand that there is a methodology that deals with the different environments.
And Eric, as you know, I got to tell you, we started doing this during the tech bubble.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, did it save our clients. And it did so again during the financial crisis. It did so again during, the COVID, and it's doing it now. So It's a really nice process, and it's great in concept. I'm not going to lie. Here's the thing. It's not a set it, forget it thing, because as people are taking cash flow, right? You've got to replenish. So we're always in a state of replenishing, because I want to make sure that you, the listener who submitted this question, I want to make sure you're always 7 years ahead of the next crisis.
Right. So definitely not a hands-off
Correct.
kind of approach.
Exactly.
So next question here, Patti, and great stuff, by the way. It says, "Hi, Patti. I've heard that taxes in retirement can really sneak up on you. I'll be losing a big salary, but I still have investment income. Are there ways to lower my taxes before I retire, or will it be too late?" So what do you say to this listener, right?
Eric, I love this question. I absolutely love this question. Here's the deal, Mr. or Mrs. Listener, or Mr. and Mrs. Listener. The good news is you are probably looking at a wonderful opportunity to save a boatload of taxes. What we found is that when people retire, they often go from a high tax bracket to a lower tax bracket, especially if they've done some planning and modeling, because make no mistake, what people need when they retire is cash flow, not necessarily taxable income. So if you can plan it, and so that if you can maintain your cash flow to pay your bills and do all the things that you want to do, especially in freshman year, right? Travel, have fun, enjoy it while you have your health. Go ahead and do those things. Also recognize that your tax bracket's probably going to be lower, and it's a wonderful opportunity. I mean, you know and I know a lot of people end up in a 12% tax bracket. Well, folks, Mr. and Mrs. Listener, chances are, if you have investments, you may have gains. You can take gains if you're in a 12% tax bracket and not pay any tax. That is a beautiful thing. Or if you don't have non-retirement accounts where you have gains, maybe think about doing Roth conversions up to the tippy top of your tax bracket. And that can be strategically planned. Now, we got to be careful about this because there's some unintended consequences, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, for example, if our listeners are retiring before the age of 65, they're going to need medical insurance, right? If you're on the ACA, you know that your cash flow is taken care of, chances are you might qualify for some subsidies. Well, you don't want to lose those subsidies because that's free money, right? It can lower your premium significantly for really good insurance until you hit Medicare. But if you do this Roth conversion, guess what? You might lose your subsidy.
Right. So you might be able to get some income at a low tax bracket, but at the same time compromise that very, valuable tax credit.
Exactly. So that's exactly. So that's why we want to take a holistic approach to this modeling that we do to understand if we do this, what is it really going to look like, and how much money are we really saving? Is it going to be worth the risk that they end up next April paying a lot of money back, or we know about Medicare, right? If we do Roth conversions and we increase their taxable income, their modified adjusted gross income, they might be subject to this nasty thing called IRMA.
Oh, yes, the unintended consequences of these actions.
Exactly. So let's understand it so that people aren't getting hit with surprises. But guys, there's great opportunities until you hit RMD age, which is typically, age 73 right now. It'll be 75 for many people listening today. That's a lot of years where you can do some really cool tax planning.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you highlight something really important is there's kind of a, for a lot of people and for the listener here is just to understand that there's kind of a Goldilocks zone.
Yes.
Where there's a period of time when these things will make sense and they have to be very coordinated, but ultimately they don't tend to persist forever. So it's really important to make sure you take advantage of these opportunities.
Right.
So next question here comes in, says, "Dear Patti, retirement sounds amazing. No more 6 a.m. alarms, but I'm also terrified of running out of money, especially if the market crashes or something unexpected happens." How apropos for the current time we're in here in early April. But how can I make sure my plan can handle the curveballs? So what do you say to this listener?
What I would say to this listener is just assume that you are going to get hit with these curveballs. Understand what that might mean to your lifestyle, to your cash flow. And in addition to plan A, you got to have plan B. Ready, aimed, and ready to go. Because here's the deal. They are going to happen. And you don't want to have to figure it out in the midst of the crisis, because that's when people make their biggest mistakes. Retirement is the most expensive thing you're going to spend money on, bar none. So, we think about what we do for our kids, planning for college. Do the same thing for your retirement. Think about modeling these things out. It's wonderful if you get your 6% rate of return every single year. Let's face it, that's probably not going to happen. Some years you're going to get more than 6%, and there are going to be those years where you lose money, and sometimes a lot of money. If that happened, what would you do? Would you still be okay? Make sure that you have the risk capacity. And I would say to everybody, we all have to ask these risk tolerance questions. As you know, Eric, I think they're kind of bunk because nobody really knows until they're in it. Because, let's face it, the last crisis that occurred, you were still working. Chances are you didn't really think about it because you had your income. Or during the tech bubble, when we lost over 50%, you may not have had the portfolio that you have today. And you weren't facing retirement. So just understand, risk tolerance is one thing, risk capacity is quite another. And I believe that can be measured. Run the numbers.
Yeah, I think, what's wonderful about what you just articulated there is really highlighting that, in this particular discipline, it's an art and it's a science.
Yes.
To some extent, it is an art form, trying to understand kind of the psychological profile of the individual and kind of their makeup. But then the science is, like you said, really running the numbers, understanding the risk capacity. Those are things that are quantifiable.
And we do it in advance before the thing happens, so we understand and we're ready with plan B. That's the secret.
And I think, too, part of that plan is just helping people have the proper expectation to understand what can happen.
Yes.
And I think that's powerful.
It
when
is
you go through episodes like this that can be really jarring.
Well, what's really cool, Eric? I am pleasantly surprised how few phone calls we're getting because everybody knows we've got this, right? Yeah. Over the weekend, I ran the numbers on every single client we had and was pleasantly surprised because we know these things are going to happen. We're ready. We know who needs cash flow. We're ready. They don't have to think about it for 7 years because we have been doing what we talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you ready for the bonus question here?
Bonus question.
All right. The bonus round.
Oh, boy. I hope I can.
Here we
I'm
go.
up to it.
All right. So, dear Patti, everyone talks about saving for retirement, but no one mentions the emotional side of stepping away from my career. I've been working for 40 years and worry about losing my identity and purpose. So how do successful retirees handle the non-financial aspects of transition? And this is such a fascinating question because this goes beyond kind of this basic financial need and really talks about a different set of needs that are kind of on a higher order.
They really are. And what I love about these questions that have been submitted, they're submitted anonymously. Yep. This could have been, a CEO of some company who wondered how he was going to have identity and purpose after retirement. It could be a woman. And I will tell you, it is really, that's why we do what we do. I love the fact that we are as holistic as we are, because this stuff is important. And I can tell you that a lot of people go through a really rough period of time when they're trying to figure this out. And what's cool is we get to prepare them for that. I can remember early in my career having a man in my conference room who was practically in tears because he just said, I've been retired for 6 months and I'm bored. I don't really know what to do. I've done all the things. We've traveled all of our lives. I'm bored and I'm thinking about going back to work. And for him, that might have been the right answer because he wasn't prepared emotionally for what he was going to face. So I think that, and to be honest with you, men and women face this, right? Let's face it. I mean, gray divorce has tripled since the 1990s. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it's fascinating, though, because we spend so many years of our life going to work, being apart, whether it's a one income or a two income household, and suddenly you retire and you're together all the time.
Exactly.
That must be different.
What's interesting about those statistics is that a lot of times it's the women who request this separation.
Oh, goodness, wow.
Because a lot of times, women tend to be reaching out to their friends or going out to lunch, et cetera. For a lot of men, and I hope this is okay, it doesn't mean to be a gender specific, but a lot of men don't necessarily have those deep friendships. And so when they retire, they're tagging on their wife's, coattails saying, okay, what are we going to do today? And, his wife is saying, I know what I'm doing. I don't care what you're going to do. And that leads to some difficulties, right? So, it's an important question. And really, to be honest with you, sometimes I'll ask the question like, why do you want to retire? What are you retiring to?
Right.
Again, earlier in my career, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, I had a woman who was a scientist, and she was walking down the hallway. She came into the conference room and said, oh, Patti, please, can I please retire? And so I started to ask her questions. And so pretend her name is Susan. I said, so Susan, what is it about work? What is it about retiring that is so attractive to you? Like, you're a scientist. Do you like what you do? I know that you've been working on this research for 20 years. Do you no longer feel a passion for that research? And she said, oh, I love it. We've made so much progress. I feel so proud about it. We're going to come up with a solution. I'm really excited about that. So I said, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So is it the people? Do you have a boss who's hanging over your shoulder all the time, telling you what to do, micromanaging you? Do you really not like your colleagues? Is that what it's kind of getting to? She said, no, I love the people that I work with. So I said, okay, so you love what you do and you enjoy the people that you're working with. What is it that makes you want to retire? She said, you know what? We have to go into the office and, the schlepping back and forth, it's just gotten really old. So I said to her, so Susan, what I'm hearing is you want to retire from the commute. I said, okay.
Yeah, the regimented nature. Yeah.
You know what? That's what it really came down to. So, let's make sure that we understand why. What is it what makes you want to retire, and what are you retiring to? Because again, purpose and identity, they're really important. Friends are important. Social security, having a tribe. The honeymoon phase is the honeymoon phase, and it's freshman year in college, and people want to go nuts. And by all means, if you're watching or listening, by all means, go nuts. It's fun. Enjoy. You worked hard all of your life. Enjoy. Freshman year in college. No more mom and dad, right?
Well, listen, that was action-packed. Yes. And thank you so much, Patti, for all those insights. So for all of you out there, we're so grateful to our listeners and also to those of you that have submitted questions for this wonderful new take called Dear Patti that we're trying out. Yeah. And also for anybody out there that might have questions that you'd like to ask, things that might be bugging you, keeping you up at nighttime, or just things that you're naturally curious about, feel free to email us at dearpatti@keyfinancialinc.com and just put Dear Patti in the subject line. Ask your question, and you might be surprised. It might end up on a future episode.
Thank you, Eric Furman, our Chief Planning Officer. You always make it fun.
Likewise.
Take care. Have a great day, everybody.